Welcome students and focused learners to today's Explainer. Today, we're going to be diving into an absolute masterclass in politics, power, and statecraft. I want you to think back to a staggering 25,000 years ago. The world was really just beginning to settle into organized human life, and it was right there, on the ancient soils of India, that a massive storm began to brew. This wasn't a weather event, but a political and structural storm that would eventually shape the destiny of the entire subcontinent. Now, this isn't just some boring list of dates and dead kings for you to memorize. It's an epic, almost cinematic story of how one tiny, seemingly ordinary state transformed into a colossal empire, with borders so vast they couldn't even be measured by the blood of its greatest emperors. This is the story of Magadha. Literally, the ultimate political academy where strategy moved way faster than the sword, and where sheer ambition brought all of Asia to its knees. Which brings us to the central question of today's lesson, the core mystery that we need to solve together. Back in the ancient landscape of northern India, there were 16 major states. So out of all 16, why did Magadha alone become this unstoppable superpower? Was it just sheer luck? Was it brutal force? Or was it a perfectly calculated mix of geography, military might, and, honestly, unparalleled political genius? Okay, let's dive into this. Here is the syllabus for our lesson today. We're going to start by looking at the 16 Mahajanapadas and Magadha's rise. Then, we'll analyze the strategies of Bimbisara and Ajatashatru, followed by the Nanda Dynasty's power and sudden fall. After that, we'll get into the legendary Chanakya and Chandragupta Maurya, look at Emperor Ashoka and the end of the empire, and finally, we'll wrap up with Magadha's historical legacy. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the 16 Mahajanapadas and the rise of Magadha. So, our timeline begins in the 6th century BCE. I really want you to picture the map of northern India at this time. It absolutely wasn't a unified country like we know today. It was deeply fractured into 16 distinct, powerful states known as the Mahajanapadas. Some of these were monarchies ruled by kings. Others were actually early forms of republics. And they were just constantly forming alliances and fighting wars with each other. But here is the critical fact you need for your notes. Not a single one of these 16 states possessed the strength, the resources, or the structural vision to dominate all the others. Well, that is until Magadha leveraged its ultimate geographical cheat codes. Located in modern-day southern Bihar, Magadha was perfectly positioned. It was nestled right between the mighty Ganga and Son rivers, which gave them incredible agricultural fertility and natural trade routes. But it was also basically wrapped in a giant fortress of natural protection. We're talking high mountains and dense forests that made it an absolute nightmare for any enemy army to even try to invade. But you know what their most vital resource was? Iron. The hills surrounding Magadha were absolutely packed with iron mines. And in the ancient world, whoever controls the iron controls the weapons. Whoever controls the weapons controls the power. Magadha had the iron. Moving right along to Section 2, the strategies of Bimbisara and Ajatashatru. Now, having all those resources is great, but you need visionary leaders to actually utilize them, right? This brings us to the Nanda Dynasty, who were essentially the early architects of the Magadha Empire. To understand how an empire is built from scratch, we really have to look at its first two major rulers. It was a father and a son, and they used wildly different, yet equally effective, methods to expand their territory. And this brilliantly illustrates the duality of statecraft. First up, we have the father, King Bimbisara. When he took the throne, he was smart enough to realize that brute force alone just wouldn't work. So, he leaned heavily into diplomacy. He arranged 3 incredibly strategic marriages with princesses from Kosala, the Vaishali Republic, and Punjab. By literally becoming family with his biggest rivals, he secured his borders without having to shed a single drop of blood. He focused on building roads, boosting trade, and constructing his beautiful, heavily fortified capital city, Rajgir. But then, you have his son, Ajatashatru, who had a completely different philosophy. Ironically, his name literally means one who has no enemies, which is wild. Mostly because he just destroyed them all. He ruthlessly starved his own father to death just to take the throne. Knowing his neighbors despised him for this, he didn't wait around. He went straight on the offensive. Against the powerful Vaishali Republic, he unleashed terrifying new military tech, catapults that hurled massive stones, and these horrifying chariots equipped with swinging blades. So basically, Bimbisara built the foundation with a handshake, and Ajatashatru expanded the walls with a blade. This brings us to Section 3. The Nanda Dynasty, their incredible power, and their eventual fall. As we move our timeline forward, past the Haryanka and the short-lived Shishunaga dynasties, we arrive at a monumental shift in Indian history. This era is completely defined by one man, Mahapadmananda. He systematically conquered almost all the remaining Mahajanapadas and brought the vast majority of northern India under one single undisputed rule for the very first time. And to maintain that kind of crazy dominance, they had to build a military machine unlike anything the world had ever seen. Just look at these numbers. The Nanda Dynasty commanded a staggering 200,000 infantry soldiers, 20,000 cavalry, 2,000 chariots, and a terrifying force of 3,000 war elephants. I mean, this was literally one of the largest standing armies on the planet at that time. They turned their new capital, Pataliputra, into a city of immense grandeur. But, students, there was a fatal flaw. The Nanda kings became incredibly greedy and tyrannical. They taxed their citizens so heavily that public hatred just began to boil over. So sure, their army was massive, but the foundation of public support was completely crumbling, and that set the perfect stage for a massive rebellion.
Which leads perfectly into Section 4, Chanakya and Chandragupta Maurya.
You know, when a ruler becomes that corrupt, history often provides a visionary to tear them down. Enter Chanakya. He was a fiercely intelligent and incredibly stern Brahmin scholar from the great Taxila University. After suffering a really severe public insult at the hands of the Nanda king, Chanakya stormed out, vowing to completely destroy the entire dynasty. But a mastermind needs a warrior, right? He found his instrument in a young, brilliant, and super ambitious protege named Chandragupta Maurya. Let's look at how this duo built one of the greatest military strategies in all of history. Because really, how do two guys defeat an army of over 200,000? Well, step one was Chanakya's absolute, unwavering vow of revenge that provided their ideological fuel. Step two was brilliant opportunism. Alexander the Great had just invaded India's borders and retreated, leaving a huge power vacuum in the northwest. Chandragupta and Chanakya swooped right in, allied with local leaders, and secured that territory to build their own base. And finally, step three. They were smart enough not to fight the massive Nanda army head-on. Instead, they used guerrilla warfare. They'd attack at night, vanish by day, they just completely exhausted the Nanda forces, until the final battle where the very last Nanda king was decisively defeated. And the empire that Chandragupta built from those ashes was just staggering. He didn't just replace the Nandas, he completely eclipsed them. When Alexander the Great's brilliant generals, Seleucus Nicator, tried to invade, Chandragupta crushed him in battle. The resulting peace treaty forced Seleucus to hand over vast territories, including modern-day Kabul, Kandahar, and Herat. The Magadha Empire now stretched all the way from the mountains of Afghanistan to the shores of Bengal. It was massive. And the secret to managing all this vast land? Chanakya's masterpiece, the Arthashastra. This text is an absolute masterclass on politics, economics, espionage, and warfare, and it served as the empire's ultimate operational guide. Now for Section 5, Emperor Ashoka and the End of the Empire. So after Chandragupta eventually renounced his throne for a spiritual life, his son Bimbisara expanded the empire southwards. But the empire actually reached its absolute geographic and cultural zenith under Bimbisara's son, the legendary Emperor Ashoka. Under Ashoka, Magadha wasn't just a kingdom anymore. It was practically the entire Indian subcontinent united under a single ruler. But Ashoka's legacy is really defined by a profound, violently traumatic turning point, the Kalinga War. Ashoka led a massive campaign to conquer Kalinga, and while he won, the cost was horrific. We're talking hundreds of thousands of people slaughtered. The rivers literally ran red with blood. Standing right there amidst all that carnage, Ashoka experienced a profound moral crisis. This unimaginable loss of life completely transformed him. He renounced violence, embraced Buddhism, and instituted a policy of Dhamma, which meant ruling through righteousness, compassion, and nonviolence. He even carved these messages into massive stone pillars across Asia. But make no mistake about it, while he embraced peace, his administrative grip remained ironclad. He ruled a peaceful empire, yes, but it was still without a doubt the most powerful empire in the world. Let's just take a quick breath and recap this epic timeline to see the broader picture. We started in the 6th century BCE, with the Haryanka dynasty laying the groundwork. Then the Shishunagas and Nandas in the 5th and 4th centuries really consolidated that power. Next, the glorious Maurya era absolutely dominated from the 4th to the 2nd century BCE. But, as history so often shows us, after Ashoka's death, the administration began to weaken. The later kings just lacked his administrative genius. The vast empire fractured, local rulers rebelled, and the military softened. This great era finally ended with a bloody coup in the 2nd century BCE, when a general named Pushimitra Shunga assassinated the very last Mauryan king, establishing the Shunga dynasty. Magadha survived, sure, but its golden age as an unassailable superpower was officially over. And finally, Section 6, Magadha's historical legacy. As we bring this incredible historical sweep to a resolution, we really have to ask ourselves, what does the rise and fall of Magadha actually teach us about the mechanics of nation building? Because it isn't just about memorizing the names of old kings for a test, it's about understanding the very foundation of power itself. So the crucial point is this. True power is never an accident. It requires a perfect alignment of the right geographical timing, an ambitious leader, and a ruthless, calculated strategy. We learned from the Haryankas that diplomacy and force are just two sides of the exact same coin. We learned from the Nandas that having a massive military means absolutely nothing if your own people hate you. We learned from Chanakya that intelligence and strategy can outmaneuver sheer numbers every time. But above all, we learned that no single empire lasts forever. Yet Magadha's greatest achievement was conceptual. They took 16 warring, fractured states and proved that they could actually be united into one single structural vision. They literally laid the political blueprint for every Indian empire that followed, from the Guptas all the way to the Mughals. To wrap up today's lesson, I want to leave you with this really powerful translated quote. Magadha is not just a name, it is an idea. It's the idea of unity, of strategic expansion, and of a highly centralized civilization. I challenge you, as students of history, to look at modern India today. Think about it. How much of its political boundaries, its administrative structures, and its unified identity are built directly upon the foundation laid by Chanakya, Chandragupta, and Ashoka over 2 millennia ago? Really think about that. Keep studying hard, and I'll see you in the next explainer.